Democrats must recognize that Zohran Mamdani is the future of the party. Unfortunately, it's the Republican Party. Get it? But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, ladies?
Bill Maher is once again scorching his own party, this time targeting New York's new mayor, Zohran Mamdani. Touted as the DNC's latest shiny star, Mamdani has captivated liberals nationwide, but Maher isn't buying the hype. His verdict on Zohran's leadership potential is blunt, brutal, and fiery. Buckle up, smash subscribe, and let's dive into this explosive breakdown right now with facts, humor, and sharp insight.
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won. In districts, Trump also won. All moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong, moving to the center.
According to Bill Maher, the Democratic Party resembles a house split down the middle. On one side stands a loud and expanding wing that openly flirts with socialism and believes the party should embrace the label. On the other side are Democrats who refuse to even say the word, fully aware of how toxic it sounds to everyday voters outside elite activist spaces. Maher aligns with this second group. He argues that while socialism may sound fashionable at rallies, on social media, or across college campuses, it turns into electoral poison when presented to working-class voters in swing districts. Maher warns that history, both in the United States and internationally, proves socialist branding pushes away moderates, independents, and even reliable Democrats who simply want stability, affordability, and common sense. His message is blunt and urgent. If the party keeps prioritizing ideological purity over practical appeal, it will narrow its own coalition and hand victories to Republicans.
Problem is, Gen Z thinks socialism's wired and capitalism's tired and billionaires are what's for dinner. And who can blame them? If you're 30 and still sharing a bathroom with roommates, capitalism isn't working for you. People will reject any economic system where there's strange hair on the soap. No one wants to be approaching middle age and still writing their name on food before they put it in the fridge. So they're quiet quitting capitalism and texting socialism that they're down to Thing is, socialism will because socialism, to put it simply, just doesn't work and has never worked, like Kevin Federline.
Maher explains why socialism continues to pull in supporters, arguing that its appeal is actually quite simple. In his view, many of those drawn to it are middle-aged Americans who feel stuck, exhausted, or left behind by a system that failed to meet its promises. For them, socialism begins to look like a lifeline, a last-chance escape from financial pressure, stalled careers, and deep personal frustration. Maher doesn't ridicule this mindset. Instead, he acknowledges the pain behind it. However, he draws a firm line between empathy and self-deception. He argues that socialism offers emotional comfort rather than real solutions. It promises safety and fairness while ignoring human nature, incentives, and how power truly operates. Maher's warning is direct and unapologetic. Socialism has never succeeded anywhere, at any scale, and there is no reason to believe it suddenly will now. Rebranding it with trendy language only postpones the inevitable disappointment rather than preventing it.
I know the kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's Socialism for the 21st Century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century, a mess.
It's easy to look back at the past and assume earlier generations simply got it wrong, believing that with modern knowledge, better intentions, and smarter leaders, we can repeat the same experiments and finally succeed. Sometimes that optimism is justified, but history has a way of repeating itself when the underlying ideas never truly change. Maher's argument is that socialism has not meaningfully evolved since its beginnings. The language sounds gentler, the branding looks cleaner, and the promises feel more compassionate, yet the core mechanics remain intact. Centralized control, warped incentives, and concentrated power consistently produce the same results. Those results rarely end well for governments or citizens who live under them. Maher argues that believing this time will be different isn't hope, it's denial. Ignoring decades of real-world evidence doesn't reduce the risks. It practically guarantees them. When history keeps flashing warning signs, pretending they don't apply becomes a reckless and dangerous gamble, with consequences everyone pays.
It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar.
Maher predicts that if Mandani pushes New York towards socialism, the city could become the next high-profile casualty of a failed ideology. He says the damage wouldn't hit overnight, but it would follow a familiar script. Businesses would slow hearing, scale back, or leave entirely, causing wages to stall and opportunities to vanish. Investment would dry up, innovation would flee, and job growth would shrink. Infrastructure already under strain would decay further. Unreliable power, worsening transit, crumbling roads, and public services that cost more while delivering less. To cover widening budget gaps, taxes would keep rising, squeezing middle-class families and small businesses until many are forced out. Maher insists this isn't fear-mongering, but a pattern repeated wherever socialist policies gain control. New York, he warns, is already costly and fragile. Adding rigid ideology to existing dysfunction could transform solvable problems into a lasting crisis. His conclusion is blunt. Once decline begins, revering course is harder than stopping it before it starts.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor f*** in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
Maher cited what he calls a textbook example of socialism's recurring failure, pointing to Bernie Sanders' push for single-payer health care as a proposed fix for medical bureaucracy. The promise was simple and appealing. Remove private insurers, centralize payments, and health care would supposedly become cheaper, faster, and more efficient. Maher argues that reality shattered that illusion. Instead of shrinking bureaucracy, single-payer systems often swap multiple smaller layers for one enormous, slow-moving government apparatus. Costs didn't vanish, they expanded. Wait times grew longer, choices became more limited, and efficiency gave way to political decision-making. Maher stresses that his critique isn't ideological but practical. Good intentions, he says, don't cancel out economic realities or human behavior. When the government becomes the only payer, rationing is unavoidable, innovation slows, and accountability becomes unclear. What was marketed as a streamlined solution ultimately became another warning sign. In Maher's view, the experiment didn't merely struggle, it reinforced why socialism repeatedly collapses when tested in the real world.
I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more.
Here, Maher shifts into an educator's role, directing his message at those who may be convincing themselves that socialism is a personal or national cure-all. He explains that the United States already incorporates elements of socialism into its system. From Social Security and Medicare to unemployment benefits and public education, government programs have long existed to soften capitalism's harshest edges. These policies are designed to create a safety net, not to replace the entire economic framework. Maher's point is that recognizing these programs does not equal endorsing full-scale socialism. There is a clear and critical difference between regulating capitalism and abandoning it altogether. He argues that capitalism, despite its flaws, remains the primary engine of innovation, economic growth, and opportunity. Socialism, by contrast, often promises fairness but delivers stagnation, reduced incentives, and increased control. For Maher, reforming capitalism is necessary and responsible, but attempting a full revolution is dangerous and reckless.
From time immemorial have always come up with bad ideas. They're kids. Thinking up stupid shit is what they do. But parents used to tell them, that's ridiculous. The world doesn't work that way. Not today's parents. They say, you're right, honey. Gender is just a social construct. Please, sometimes your mother and I forget which one of us has.
Maher targets Democrats for what he describes as a rising culture of fear and hesitation inside the party. He says many are terrified of saying the wrong thing, offending the wrong group, or calling out bad behavior, even when it comes from their own ranks. In Maher's view, that fear has grown so intense they no longer correct anyone at all, not activists, not colleagues, and not even their own children. Instead of leading with confidence, they tiptoe around controversy. He argues this anxiety has driven Democrats into constant pandering to the far left, a small but loud faction obsessed with purity tests and instant outrage. While catering to that crowd, the party loses touch with what everyday voters care about: public safety, economic stability, affordability, and common sense. Maher warns that real leadership demands backbone, not applause from social media. If Democrats keep governing from fear, they will lose elections.
Of the mean girls who policed their far-out fringe. Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton had a perfect score on LGBTQ issues from the Human Rights Campaign. But when he said, I have 2 little girls, I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a male or formerly male athlete, his own campaign manager.
Maher explains that this is exactly why so many Democrats remain silent on woke ideology. He argues it's not because they truly believe in it, but because they fear the mean girls of social media. One wrong word or honest thought can trigger an online mob demanding apologies and punishment. The threat of being labeled, canceled, or endlessly attacked has become a powerful tool of control. To protect themselves, many Democrats choose silence over honesty. They repeat approved talking points, nod in agreement, and hope attention never turns their way. Maher views this as cowardice disguised as party unity. Going along with the crowd may feel safe in the short term, But when that crowd is moving in the wrong direction, silence becomes participation. His warning is blunt and direct. Politics driven by fear doesn't create progress or solutions. It weakens leadership, erodes trust, and ultimately leads to collapse rather than reform.
Imagine that. A congressman merely stands up for the liberal principle, the one we still call Title IX, that women get an equal shot in sports, and now it gets you labeled a Nazi. The reason Gretchen Whitmer looked like a toddler playing peekaboo in the Oval Office is she's afraid of the Liz Bratts of the world and the 12 social justice warriors on the internet and what they might tweet to their 7 followers. Alyssa Slotkin calls her party weak and woke. She's right. People vote on instinct. They can smell fear a swing state away, and they'd rather have strong and wrong.
Bill Maher's critique of the Democratic Party is brutal and unfiltered. He argues the party is deeply divided, split between those flirting with socialism and those who understand the risks. On one side, a growing faction demands ideological purity and radical change. On the other, there are Democrats who still believe in practical governance and real-world solutions. Maher warns that socialism, despite its appeal to the frustrated and disillusioned, has never worked anywhere at any scale. It promises fairness, but history and experience show it brings stagnation, control, and disappointment. Even the social programs that exist in America, Social Security, Medicare, unemployment benefits, are safety nets within capitalism, not replacements for it. Beyond ideology, Maher criticizes a culture of fear that has taken over the party. Democrats are terrified of offending anyone, afraid of social media mobs, and hesitant to call out wrongdoing even when it comes from their own side. As a result, they pander to a vocal fringe while ignoring the concerns of everyday voters. Following the herd may feel safe, but it only leads to irrelevance. Maher's message is clear. Without courage, pragmatism, and respect for history, the party risks losing not just elections, but its identity. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.